Hey, let's jumpstart this. Sterling, Marcus, both two brothers that are really smart, really respect, doing really good things in tech. So Sterling, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks for the introduction, the brief introduction there, Marcus. My name is Sterling Smith. I'm the founder and CEO at Sandbox Commerce, a no-code mobile app builder for retailers who use Shopify and BigCommerce. They can drag and drop their way to building a mobile app in less than 10 or 15 minutes using our technology that we then publish to both iPhone and Android app stores. I'd love to talk more about that at some other point. I'm also the founder one of the founders of a company called Black Freelancer. You can find out more about that at blackfreelancer.com. But excited to be on the panel. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Sterling. Hey, Marcus, how you doing? It kind of confused me at the beginning when they introduced another Marcus again, but happy to have you, brother. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Marcus Egan. I am a senior product manager for a product called Atlas Search at MongoDB. And so it's managed search service on top of the fastest growing database platform as a service. I also am an angel investor in a number of companies founded by underrepresented minorities. Chipper Cash is obviously my biggest win as of now. Jeff Bezos joined, and there's also Parrot Mob, which is like allows you to pay by text, so you don't have to use your credit card. You can just get your products through a conversation. And also there's like a lot of AI in in both of those products. One for fraud detection, and the other for recommending products that the person you're texting with might be interested in. So a lot of experience. I'm also a contributor to Apache Lucene and Apache Solar, which are probably the ways that outside of Google that most people interact with AI on a day-to-day basis.
Well, that's fantastic. So as you can tell, everybody out there, we have two really smart brothers. The first thing I want to ask is, and I want to throw out there, is the thing that I get all the time when people talk about technology. People try to say technology is not biased at all. Technology is just tech. So quick question, how can the technology that people are building be biased?
One way that's probably obvious to most is the models that are used to train the technology that we interact in tend to skew white and male, because the creators tend to skew white and male. So like transcribing, like if you talk to Alexa or you talk to Siri, you might be at a disadvantage if your accent is a little different or your inflections are a bit different, or if you're speaking Black vernacular English like the folk do in my family. They might come up with some mumbo jumbo for something that sounded clear or seemed clear to you.
Yeah, I mean, from a high level, I think Marcus nailed it. From a high level, really, AI is impacting every aspect of our lives today. One example that I'll probably give a little bit later is in employment. But across the board, when it comes to, before there was AI, humans, the people that create, a lot of white men specifically, in many cases, the people that create the algorithms today, affected our ability to get jobs, hail taxis in New York. Those guys have since, in many instances, have created the Ubers of this world. But previously, if you were standing in the street in New York trying to get a taxi, you couldn't get a taxi because it was a biased taxi cab industry in many cases. I know that happened to me on a couple of occasions pre-Uber. And so I think that what we're seeing now is just an automated example of what has happened traditionally in our history. So just high level, I'm sure we'll go a little bit deeper throughout this conversation.
Yeah, fantastic, Sterling. So you brought up that there's some personal experience. So what I'm going to do right now is ask, are there any practical real world cases that you've seen that could present a problem for you, the masses. And we are talking about, this is Black in Tech, so we're talking about how does it affect Black people. Sterling?
Yeah, so a lot of people who may be listening on the call, or people in the Austin community who know me and know the hustle, know Marcus. I think we're coming from the same. Marcus, Carey, and I go way back. But in this community, I can speak firsthand. In the Central Texas community, it's just as difficult as anywhere else in the United States to get funding if you are a non-white founder and a non-white male founder in many cases. And so throughout the process of building and growing commerce, which is now a profitable business, which we're super excited to be profitable. But we have, that's just a milestone along the way to hopefully a massive exit for the participating angel investors, but that have come on board. But the long story short is that, throughout the process of building up this company specifically, I learned along the way that the answer for us at least wasn't going to be to go and raise a huge fund from institutional investors. Every time we'd go and try and talk with institutional investors, we just would hit walls, and it took a lot of time. We didn't really get as far as we wanted to there. So we said, hey, going into 2020, I said to myself, let's try another path. So why don't we try self-funding? So throughout the journey of self-funding, I launched my own personal website, sterlingsmith.dev, and then to try and do some freelance work, and ended up finding that there was a path to growing a business using freelance work, using sterlingsmith.dev. But in the early stages of that, I created an Upwork profile. And Upwork initially allows you to create a profile by entering your information without necessarily validating. And I created my Upwork profile, and for the first 2 or 3 months, I wasn't getting any job recs. And I was wondering, hey, I wonder why I'm not getting winning any of these RFPs that I'm submitting to, even with having being an engineer at Walmart, Booz Allen, and Lockheed, and building a startup and building another startup. And it was and so my fiance and I were having a conversation at dinner, and she said, I said, why don't I change my photograph to be look like a guy that went to USC and see what happens. And of course, I swear to God, I started winning one gig after the next gig. And until about 3 months in, Upwork sent me a notification that I needed to validate my ID and do a video conference to confirm that I am who I was. And of course, ended up having to change my photograph back to brother. I'm a handsome brother, but the long story short is that we ended up having enough clout to win more bids. But long story short is, at the end of the year, I ended up it was a life lesson that technology, artificial intelligence, and these systems do bias toward white men. And as a result, found a new opportunity, which is Black Freelancer, with a group of other folks that it's really to help promote people who celebrate diversity, to help Black freelancers who are interested in creating a profile and growing their revenue on the side through freelance work. There's a home for you. Whereas, places like Upwork, although they're great for society and they've done a lot of good work for me specifically, they're kind of engineered from the very beginning to help non-diverse candidates. And so I'll leave it at that. And, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to ask me other questions, Marcus.
Man, that's crazy. Marcus, looking forward to it. It's kind of remind me of Undercover Brother or Black Klansman or something.
That's wild.
I do what you got to do. So,
yeah. For me, and this is more on the technical side, I was dealing with so in distributed systems, you'll have one node will be the source of truth, and the other nodes are just replicas of that source of truth, oftentimes. That's a basic explanation of them. But, I was dealing with this code while working on a project, and everywhere I'm looking, it's like, master this, slave that, master this, slave that. I'm like, this is some bullshit. Like, has no black person ever looked at this code? And it happened last year, like in the fall of last year, or summer of last year, while, a lot of other things were going on in the world. And I'm thinking, like, if somebody looks at this code in 20 years, and Lucene, it was the Yahoo search engine, and it was open sourced by Yahoo and donated to Apache in 2001. So this is the 20-year anniversary of it. And it's like, has anybody looked at this code in the last 20 years? Because people are going to be confused when they see this slave and this master everywhere. Because the way it works is, if the master goes down, one of the slaves takes over. But in reality, if the master goes down, the slaves are going to run away. It's like, this doesn't make sense. And so when you talk about common names and and in science, like the blue jay isn't the green jay. It's not the color green, it's a blue jay. Like, that's the common name, speaks to understanding, so they're not confused when they come across it. And like the master slave thing is confusing to me, it's inaccurate. So that, like, we have to step in, we have to ensure participants in this discourse, in this build process, because what else are they calling slaves? Like, what else is incorrect and posing a business risk? Like, I look at diversity as the right thing for your business, like, not a pat on the back. It's like, if you improve your models, if you seed them with more diverse data, uh, they can be uh, more effective in discriminating in the ML sense, not in the prejudice sense, but like, they can be more effective in achieving the goals that you've built them for. The tools can do the job better. And I mean, why would any black person want to work on code base that says master slave everywhere? So open to Jira.
Yeah.
I
Well,
used an emotive Jira to get people to change it. I started making the changes, and people from Bloomberg and Apple and Salesforce jumped in. And then, 2 weeks later, it was done. People, I guess they had been talking about it behind closed doors where there are no black people. But then when we jump in and get it done, and we can do that all over. Like, the Apache Lucene and Apache Solar projects aren't the only ones. There are several projects where this is the case.
and that's excellent. I like the fact that you took the initiative. But the interesting thing about that, Marcus, is you happen to be in the room per se, at least on that project, so you could make a difference. So and especially talking about AI, how do we get in the room and make AI more inclusive? How do we? They said there's a talent shortage in AI and all these different things. How are we going to allow more people like you to be a part of these AI projects in the future? Sterling, you want to tackle that first?
Yeah, and I think those are some examples that I think Marcus Carey, you and I have experienced as well with, committing, submitting commits in GitHub to the master branch. There's a lot of that going on in software development, just like there's a lot of that going on in real estate and everywhere else. So I think that it's inspiring to hear Marcus Egan talk about how he used his power to affect change. And I think that, a large way that we can affect change is through in his case, it's through the Apache Foundation. And it sounds like some open source contributions as well. And I think that, contributing to whatever code base that we're in, if we're building software collaboratively or independently within our organizations or within a larger organization, I think there's an opportunity for us to, in the code that we write, use our voice, as well as in the defense of the code that we write when we do things like code reviews and sprint planning meetings and all these things. So fundamentally, we are, I think, representative just by being in a space. I yield the floor.
Yeah. So Marcus, how do we get more people into these spaces? Not everybody is gonna have an opportunity to do graduate work at University of Michigan, one of the top programs for this, this kind of research, data science, ML, AI. If somebody doesn't have your credentials, how do they get into the room?
Yeah, so that's interesting. The way I got into the room, to be honest, when I didn't have the credentials, was I started a company. and had some success. I had to do the work because there was no one else to do the work. When you start the company, you're the first person, the only person. You have to kind of level up really quickly. And to be honest, the people that helped me along the way, a lot of them were Black. Like, it's kind of ridiculous that I have to say that, but after I built my table, then Paul Judge bought my company to go work on his table, and then after grad school, I was working at LucidWorks, which is led by a Black CEO. I mean, people don't know, it's like probably about to be a unicorn. It's a Black guy running that tech company. It's high tech. It's focused on AI, and it's a Black guy who's deep in the weeds running that company. And so really, I would charge people to build their tables, build their own tables, start their own companies. And if that's not viable for you, tell your employer you need 15% of your time to work on open source because it's so damn racist. Like, just tell them like that and see what they say. And if they fire you, call me. But you tell your employer you need 15% of your time. And that could be working on documentation for it just to get ramped up. That's a great way to get started. That could be writing tutorials to help other people use it. But tell your employer you need 15% of your time because it's so damn racist. And it's a business risk to them.
And I love this, man. Both of y'all are tremendous self-starters. I love to hear this. I mean, hopefully this motivates somebody out there that says, I can do this too. Looking at Sterling and all he's done, looking at what Marcus is doing.
Yeah.
And you feel like you can do it too.
Really quick, Marcus, Carey, I wanted to drop in. I dropped in a link to Code Triage, which is just a site that I've used before in the past. I recommend to others. If you want to get involved in any level of contribution to open source projects, whether that's documentation, code reviews, contributions, that's a website that they'll send you an email every other day with opportunities to contribute, to review code, to triage code, help out with documentation, etc. So that's a site that I recommend. That's what Marcus, as you were talking, that came to my recollection.
Okay, so we only had a short time to get this done. I highly recommend that you follow Sterling. I think Sterling, that's your Twitter handle. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my Twitter handle. Yes.
Yep. So you follow Sterling. You can follow Marcus for Peace on Twitter. You can also follow me on Twitter to keep it moving. What I like about these brothers is that they're going forward. They're not waiting for nobody to give them permission to do what they do. They're out here, they're doing it, and they're making it happen. And I really appreciate y'all for joining me on this panel. Look forward to seeing y'all soon. I'm almost vaccinated up, and we got to meet in person real soon.
Yes, thanks for having us. And also check out blackfreelancer.com, y'all. All right, peace.